Hey guys, welcome to week 3 of distance learning. It's Mr. Page. Just want to introduce you now to balance in ecosystems. Balance in ecosystems. What does that mean? Let's go over our prior learning. We talked about the community, the ecosystem, niche, or the role of every organism, population density, and limiting factors. A community refers to all of the populations of different species that live in a particular environment or habitat in the same area. A forest community, for example, would include all of the deer, the trees, bees, ticks, foxes, wolves, moose, squirrels, moss, mold, mushrooms, and flowers that exist in that forest. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms in conjunction with the living components of their environment, interacting as a system. These living and non living components are linked together through nutrient cycles and energy flows. Great examples are forests, swamplands, and oceans. These are all examples of ecosystems. Now, let's talk about what makes an ecosystem starting at the bottom. The populations would be all the different bacteria, all the different moss species, all the plants, all the mice, all the squirrels, and all the deer. These are each independent populations. Now, all of these populations form a community. Now, the community includes all of these living populations combined. And ecosystems include all of the communities plus non living parts such as oxygen, nitrogen, sunlight, water, everything. All of this combined, all three levels, would make up the ecosystem. Populations, communities, and they all make up the ecosystem. That's everything combined. A niche, we talked about that. Within an ecosystem, different organisms will fill a certain role or job that is referred to as their niche. It categorizes each individual and single species or organism in a community in a specific role that allows the ecosystem and that single species to exist. Population density refers to the number of an organism in a community for a given space. An example be the number of deer per square mile. It's not the total number of deer, but it's the density, the number of deer per square mile. How packed are they into that square mile? That refers to the density. And as you can imagine, if there are too many deer packed in a certain area, there's only a certain amount of food in that certain area. So if something happens to the food supply, well, then that's going to affect the ability of the deer to survive. Limiting factors. Well, that would be an example of something that could eliminate the food or water. Limiting factors are conditions that would limit the size of a population in a given area. There could be many. Limiting factors could also negatively impact other organisms in a given area. Some limiting factors are food sources, water sources, grazing lands, predators. How many predators are there? Fire. A fire would be a limiting factor for an ecosystem. Floods, environmental disasters, human factors. So the vocabulary for balance in the ecosystem would be the new vocabulary here on the right: ecological balance, ecological stability, ecological equilibrium, producers and consumers, and decomposers. Ecological balance refers to a term describing how ecosystems are organized in a state of stability, where species can coexist, that means live together with other species and with their environment. Ecological stability. Stability refers to the fact that there are no imbalances in population density, that there is enough energy, nutrients, and water to keep the ecosystem thriving, and that the niche roles of all are represented, and that there are no limiting factors. Ecological equilibrium represents the perfect balance where all stability factors in the ecosystem are just right so that every organism in the community thrives. Ecological equilibrium continued. This diagram demonstrates all the factors that are needed for ecological equilibrium. We have lions, that there's enough um, food for them to eat. There's sunlight. The area is not overhunted. There are enough bees to pollinate the flowers, and there's enough food, like rabbits, and then there's enough water to sustain the ecosystem. Producers and consumers. Producers are organisms that make their own food, like plants, or create food, like plants, trees, and vegetables. Consumers, on the other hand, are organisms that eat food. Now, there are three kinds of consumers. There are carnivores, they eat only meat, worms, grubs, um, they eat those types of items. Herbivores, they eat only plants, they're like vegetarians or vegan. And then omnivores eat both meat and plants. Decomposers are organisms that break down and eat dead matter and organisms. Items or organisms like worms, fungi, which would be mushrooms of all kinds. There are many kinds of fungi, mushrooms, bacteria, also a decomposer, and termites. They eat dead wood. These are all examples of decomposers, and every healthy, stable, and balanced ecosystem needs decomposers, right? There's organic matter, trees, there are different parts of the community that are dying. And so you need these decomposers to break it all down and return it back to the earth. Well, that's it, guys, for this time. This is part one. I have part two coming up also this week. Feel free to watch this as many times as you need to. You can stop it, freeze it, take notes. Be sure to complete the assignments associated with this lesson. And remember, learn something new every day. Up next, Balance in the Ecosystems, Part 2.